I'm sleeping with Vanessa. If you can't handle that, you're free to leave.
The wine glass stopped halfway to Elena's lips. Across the kitchen island, her husband of 9 years stood with his arms crossed, backlit by the pendant lights they'd chosen together at that boutique in Charleston. Daniel, 38, recently promoted to senior vice president at Meridian Capital, looked at her the way someone might assess a financial report that no longer showed favorable returns. "I'm sleeping with Vanessa," he said. His voice was steady, clinical. "If you can't handle that, you're free to leave." Elena set the glass down without drinking. Her hand didn't shake. She was 36, a former corporate attorney who'd stepped back from her career to support Daniel's meteoric rise through the finance world. She'd given him everything he needed to become who he was now standing before her. She looked at him for 3 long seconds. Then she nodded once and walked upstairs. No tears. No screaming. No breaking glass. Daniel stood alone in the kitchen, waiting for the explosion that never came. Sit back and enjoy this devastating story. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Daniel had prepared for rage. He'd rehearsed his responses, anticipated her accusations, even planned which hotel he'd stay at when she inevitably threw him out. What he hadn't prepared for was nothing. Elena didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations, didn't even mention Vanessa's name. She simply withdrew. Over the next week, she moved through the house like a ghost. She made coffee in the morning, worked quietly in the home office Daniel had stopped using years ago, and went to bed early. She didn't avoid him. She didn't engage him. She existed in the same space with the emotional temperature of a stranger sharing an elevator. Daniel found himself watching her. At night, through the crack in the office door, he could see her at the desk, reading something on her laptop. Her face was illuminated by the blue screen glow. Expression focused, methodical. Papers were spread across the surface in organized stacks. "What are you working on?" he asked once, standing in the doorway. Elena glanced up. "Just going through some old files." Her tone was pleasant, distant, the way you'd speak to a neighbor you barely knew. She returned to the screen. Daniel felt something twist in his chest that he didn't recognize. It wasn't guilt, he'd buried that weeks ago. It was something else. Something close to unease. Vanessa noticed it too. "She hasn't called me," Vanessa said over drinks at the bar Daniel now frequented downtown. She was 35, Elena's best friend since college, a marketing executive with a corner office and a taste for expensive things. Not once. No angry texts. Nothing. Daniel swirled his bourbon. "She's processing." For a week. Vanessa leaned closer, her perfume cutting through the ambient noise of the crowd. "Daniel, I know Elena. She doesn't process. She acts. This is weird." But Daniel didn't want to think about Elena's silence. He wanted to enjoy what he'd built. The freedom. The excitement. The validation of being wanted by someone who wasn't tired, who didn't look at him like a project that needed managing. He kissed Vanessa in full view of the window. Let Elena process that. But that wasn't the worst part. What Daniel didn't know, what he'd never thought to ask, was what Elena had been doing in those years she'd stepped back from law. She hadn't been idle. While he climbed the corporate ladder, Elena had been quietly doing what she did best: reading contracts, reviewing documents, making strategic investments. 3 years ago, when Daniel's firm had gone through a restructuring, Elena had loaned the company $200,000 through a shell entity she'd set up under her maiden name. Daniel had signed the paperwork without reading it. He'd been too busy celebrating his new title. 2 years ago, when Daniel's business partner needed capital to buy out a third investor, Elena had connected him with funding. Funding traced back to a trust she controlled. 1 year ago, when Daniel complained about needing stronger leverage in board meetings, Elena had helped draft a shareholder agreement. He'd never asked who owned the non-voting shares listed under private equity groups. Elena had. And now, sitting in that home office with the door cracked open, she was pulling every thread she'd woven into the fabric of Daniel's professional life. Methodically, patiently, quietly. The first public appearance happened at Marcello's, A restaurant Daniel knew Elena would never go to. It was too loud, too trendy, too much his world now. He and Vanessa arrived at 8 p.m. on a Saturday. Vanessa wore a dress that cost more than most people's rent. Daniel wore confidence like cologne. They were halfway through appetizers when he saw her. Elena sat 3 tables away with a man Daniel didn't recognize. Older, mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suit. They were speaking quietly, reviewing a document between them. Elena glanced up. Their eyes met. She smiled. Small. Polite. The kind of smile you'd give an acquaintance. Then she returned to her conversation. Daniel's fork stopped mid-air. Vanessa turned, following his gaze. Is that? Yeah. Vanessa waited for Elena to react. To storm over. To cause a scene. To do something. Elena did nothing. She finished her meeting, signed something the man handed her, shook his hand, and left without looking their direction again. Vanessa exhaled. That was anticlimactic. Daniel said nothing. But his jaw was tight. He didn't touch his food for the rest of the meal. 2 weeks after the confession, Daniel made his move. He came home to find Elena packing a suitcase in the bedroom. What are you doing? He asked, though he knew. He'd been building to this moment. Vanessa had already suggested he ask Elena to leave. Make it official. Stop the limbo. Elena folded a sweater with mechanical precision. You told me to leave if I couldn't handle it. I can't handle it. So I'm leaving. Her voice carried no bitterness. No sarcasm. Just facts. Daniel felt a strange pang, brief, fleeting, before his pride swallowed it. Where will you go? I've rented a place downtown. She zipped the suitcase. The movers will come next week for the rest. Elena. She turned to face him. Her eyes were clear. Calm. You don't owe me an explanation, Daniel. You made your choice. I'm making mine. She walked past him, suitcase rolling behind her. At the door she paused. There's one thing I need you to sign, she said. Divorce papers. My attorney will send them over. It's all very straightforward. You'll find I'm not asking for much. Then she was gone. Daniel stood in the empty bedroom, surrounded by the faint scent of her perfume, and felt something he couldn't name crawling up his spine. He told himself it was relief. If you're wondering how this plays out, stay with us. Drop a like if you're already hooked. This story is about to take a turn no one sees coming. Vanessa moved in 3 days later. She brought wine, laughter, and a sense of victory. Daniel felt vindicated. He'd chosen happiness. Authenticity. A woman who wanted him, not one who'd calcified into routine. They christened the house like it was new. But at night, Daniel found himself walking past the office Elena had used. The desk was empty now. Papers gone. Laptop gone. The only thing left was a sticky note on the monitor. Don't forget the shareholder meeting on the 18th. Daniel crumpled it and threw it away. The divorce papers arrived 1 week later. Elena's attorney had drafted them with surgical precision. No alimony. Minimal asset division. She was taking her personal accounts, her car, and a few pieces of furniture. She wasn't even asking for half the house. This is too easy, Vanessa said, reading over his shoulder. What's she playing at? She's not playing anything, Daniel said. She's just done. He signed them that afternoon. His attorney filed them the next morning. Daniel thought it was over. The first crack appeared 12 days later. Daniel received a call from his CFO. We've got a problem, Marcus said. His voice was tight. The line of credit we've been using for the Harrington acquisition. It's been frozen. Frozen? By who? The lender. Apparently there's a clause in the original agreement tied to ownership restructuring. They're calling the loan until we clarify stakeholder equity. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. That loan was secured 3 years ago. It's been fine. Yeah, well, someone triggered a review. And now the lender wants documentation on all majority investors and board-approved equity holders. Who the hell would trigger? He stopped. Elena. The second crack came from his business partner, Stephen. Daniel, I need you to explain something to me. Stephen said over the phone, his voice strained. I just got a letter from a law firm representing a private equity group I've never heard of. They're claiming they hold 18% non-voting shares in the company and are demanding a full audit of expenditures. Daniel's stomach dropped. What firm? Castellano and how? You know them. He did. It was Elena's old firm. They're saying, Stephen continued, that because their client invested during the restructure, they have audit rights under Section 9 of our shareholder agreement. The one you signed off on last year. Daniel's mouth went dry. There's no way. I pulled the documents, Daniel. It's real. And whoever this equity group is, they've got leverage. What happened next changed everything. Daniel tried calling Elena. Her number was disconnected. He tried her email. Bounced back. He drove to the address she'd given him. A luxury apartment building downtown. The front desk wouldn't confirm if she lived there. Vanessa tried reaching out. Elena's social media was deactivated. She'd vanished. Not dramatically. Not desperately. Cleanly. And in her absence, the machinery she'd built began to move. Banks demanded answers. Partners demanded documentation. Investors started asking questions. The loan that had fueled Daniel's biggest deal was suddenly in jeopardy. The private equity group, whoever they were, had triggered a clause that required full board approval for any major expenditure over $500,000. Daniel had made 3 in the last quarter alone, without approval, because he'd never thought those non-voting shares mattered. Comment below. Did you see this coming? Let us know what you think Elena's next move is. The meeting was scheduled for the 18th, the same date Elena had written on that sticky note. Daniel walked into the Meridian Capital boardroom expecting a routine quarterly review. Instead, he found the room full of people he didn't recognize. Attorneys, accountants, and sitting at the head of the table, in a charcoal suit that cost more than his car payment, Elena. She looked up as he entered. Her expression was pleasant, professional. Daniel, she said. Thank you for coming. Please sit. Vanessa, who'd accompanied him, froze in the doorway. Elena's gaze flicked to her. Vanessa, I didn't realize you were joining us. Unfortunately, this meeting is limited to stakeholders and board-approved representatives. She's with me, Daniel said, his voice hard. Then she can wait outside. Elena's tone didn't change. She gestured to the security personnel standing near the door. Personnel Daniel had never seen before. Vanessa left without a word. Daniel sat. Elena opened a folder. Let's begin. For the next 90 minutes, Elena systematically dismantled Daniel's world. She presented documents showing that the $200,000 loan she provided 3 years ago had converted to equity shares upon Daniel's promotion. Shares he'd unknowingly signed over control of when he'd restructured the company. She revealed that the private equity group demanding an audit was a trust she controlled, one that now held 22% of the company's voting power, when combined with shares held by silent partners she'd connected to the firm. She showed emails, ones Daniel had sent authorizing expenditures without board approval, violating fiduciary duty to minority shareholders. She presented a forensic audit showing that Daniel had funneled company resources into personal expenses, including the vacation he and Vanessa had taken to Turks and Caicos last month. This isn't about revenge, Elena said, her voice calm, measured. This is about protecting the integrity of an organization I helped build. You've acted recklessly. You've violated agreements. And you've exposed this company to liability. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. You set me up. No. Elena met his eyes. I protected myself. You assumed I was irrelevant. That was your mistake. One of the attorneys slid a stack of papers across the table. These are the divorce papers you signed. Elena said. You'll notice I waived alimony. I waived the house. I took almost nothing. Daniel stared at them. Because I didn't need to, Elena continued. I already owned the things that mattered. The vote was unanimous. Daniel was removed as senior vice president, effective immediately. His shares were placed under company control pending investigation into financial impropriety. Vanessa's contract with the firm, she'd been consulting on a marketing campaign, was terminated for conflict of interest. Elena abstained from the vote. She didn't need to participate. The outcome was already decided. As Daniel stood to leave, Elena spoke one last time. You told me to leave if I couldn't handle it, she said quietly. So I did. But I left with everything I built. You just didn't notice because you stopped paying attention. She closed the folder. Goodbye, Daniel. 6 months later, Elena sat in a different boardroom. This one overlooked the harbor. The company she'd helped save had recovered, restructured, thrived. She'd been offered a position on the board. She'd accepted. Daniel had taken a job at a mid-tier firm in another city. Vanessa had moved on to someone else. Elena didn't follow their lives. She didn't need to. She'd already won. Not with rage. Not with drama. With patience. With precision. With the quiet, devastating power of someone who knew exactly what she was worth. And when people asked how she'd done it, she always smiled and said the same thing. I just paid attention. What would you have done in Elena's position? Let us know in the comments. And if you made it this far, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories like this coming your way.